Looking at Minnesota and its status today, first and foremost, I think most folks here that work in the performance arena look at Minnesota as being fairly mature and having robust performance measures and a performance-based planning approach. Second, when we look at asset management and what we know about the assets, I think we vary in our level of maturity across the assets, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but certainly like many DOTs, we have fairly mature systems in place for pavements and bridges. And I think we do a pretty good job of managing those assets, having the data that's necessary for those decision-making activities. When you get into some of the other areas of asset management, what we call ancillary assets, I don't think we're anywhere close to having the same level of understanding or processes. Quasi-risk-based, in that we have invested resources in critical areas of pavements and bridge. What I mean by quasi-risk-based, I think historically we've treated pavement and bridges as being our greatest risk when it comes to the investment levels that need to be made and where we see the greatest political and public risk in terms of those investments. And so in the past, I think we've made some good risk decisions when it comes to what we're managing and where we're spending our money. But as I'll say in my remarks later, I think there's a need to expand and have a comprehensive approach for risk-based reasons as well. Working to identify maintenance needs in the 20-year highway investment plan. Our planning process is beginning to expand into understanding maintenance costs and operating costs and making that a part of our overall capital and operating planning activities, where historically I think our focus has been primarily on capital, and we don't think about all of those additional costs that are associated with maintenance and the overlap that exists between capital planning and maintenance planning, an area that we're trying to continue to improve. On the asset management side, the next statement talks about a core working group to establish a framework based on implementation guide. We have established an internal working group, strictly internal, cross-section of areas. The department's divided into divisions and functional areas, and we have good representation across all of those areas. So we've started down the path of forming a focus group. Work certainly needs to occur, as I've learned here, to broaden that potentially to our partners outside of the department. And another area that we have been evolving in is enterprise software solutions for asset management. While historically we've had a siloed approach where we have bridge management system, pavement management system, we're trying to evolve to business information systems that allow us to collect data and evaluate data across those silos in an enterprise-wide approach. So as I look at the various areas that define a mature organization, I begin to define some areas where I think we have gaps within the department. These happen to be some of the themes that we've also heard from the action planning activities over the course of the last few days with respect to the future of asset management and core areas where there can be some additional focus. The first area that we continue to try to evolve within the department is risk. And as you can see here, we talk about managing risk and managing for performance, create trade-offs beyond just asset condition. Some risks are related to public trust and confidence. So we look at this risk process as taking us beyond the traditional risk management goal of preservation first or worst first, and looking at risks to help us manage beyond our typical performance thresholds. And we look at appropriately managing risk, meaning that we may not invest sometimes in some of the low-risk assets, even if more money becomes available. I'll give you some examples of this as we talk about another risk area, goal area that may need improvement, which is goal setting and a specific example. Culture is one of the areas that we're also working on as well. The need to have a framework that's easily understood. How does asset management, risk management, and performance management work together? And while I think within the department we're evolving and developing that framework for the relationship of risk, asset management, and performance management, to the extent that I think in Minnesota we can say we're a risk-based asset and performance management organization, there's still a great deal of work that needs to be done in instituting that overall approach, having the individuals within the organization understand it and employ it. So we've got a ways to go in terms of taking that framework and making it work within the organization. Changing that framework, instituting and institutionalizing that framework, we're seeing creates a shift in control in some cases, where historically we've had a focus on bridge and pavements, and those silos have had individual responsibility for decision making and not necessarily had to look across those silos in looking at the trade-offs of investment, that there's a shift in the culture that needs to occur so that those individual silos are beginning to look at a holistic approach to the issues and the investments that are needed to address the system level needs. That's a challenge and a struggle within our organization. I believe we'll see the same challenges as we try to look at a national system as another example, and we try to figure out where the right investments need to occur as we have individual silos that are still looking at needs across this country as well. So the last statement I make in this slide is this may apply nationally as well. And when I say is there a shared national vision, the question is, do we all understand and agree to the relationship of risk, performance, and asset management so that we can move beyond that and implement that framework? Goal setting from a risk-based perspective. This is another area that we need to address within the department. Right now, much of the discussion around asset management looks at the goal of asset management as being the state of good repair. Within the department, we've seen this as potentially being a lofty goal. Why do we say that? For one reason, we were recently audited by the legislative auditor in the state of Minnesota. At that point, we were being audited on a previous preservation goal, which was invest in preservation first. It basically ensure that you have preserved your system before you invest in any other goals like safety or mobility. The outcome of that audit was very clear. The auditor said, you're not doing what you said you're going to do. We didn't have enough money to fully preserve the system before moving into safety and capacity investments. And so as we looked at the risks and certainly looked at the results of that audit, we have shifted from the goal of preservation first, or worst first, to a balanced approach to investments that incorporate thinking around risk and performance and try to find the trade-offs and optimal investments on the system. We don't have a preservation first goal anymore. We talk about a balanced approach to investments that consider risk and performance. Operational performance and physical condition are not necessarily aligned. We can come up with many examples where this occurs, where, for example, we set our performance standards for where you might put noise walls. Many of us have those responsibilities on the interstates and elsewhere. Over time, those noise walls deteriorate to the extent where they look terrible. They may still be functioning around their original performance requirement, which was to combat the noise issues for the residential neighborhoods that exist on the other side. But in reality, the risk that we're faced with managing is not performance related. It's related to the visual aspects of that noise wall and the fact that that neighborhood no longer wants to see that deteriorated wall. While it's still functioning to serve the noise issues, it's no longer acceptable, and it's creating great risk to the department if we don't address that issue. Many examples like that. Resources is another area that we're certainly dealing with in the department, in particular with the area of data collection and management, where we see these to be very resource intensive, where we've collected a great deal of data, can generate a great deal of information, but not necessarily the right data at the right time for the right decisions. So what's the right amount of information? And a about an asset class, and when is good enough are some of the issues that we're facing that we're probably going to face at a national level as well. Just to give you a quick snapshot of how this looks then and how we're trying to evolve and improve our asset management process to establish a framework and bring clarity to this data and resource issue. This is just a very quick summary of how data as the foundation to all of our decision making influences and is consistent with the performance management, risk management, and asset management relationship that as the foundation for decision making informs and ensures that we're meeting our strategic objectives and overall business directions for the department. In conclusion, we are really looking at these four areas for areas of improvement, and I think these are themes that we're all facing as we look at this nationally as well. The framework that's necessary to confirm the relationship of risk management, asset management, and performance management. Let me just skip ahead for a second. We're evolving from the place where we have independent silos, where performance management is occurring, asset management is occurring, and risk management is occurring. And that's all this slide is intending to do. To the handout that you have as well that shows this much better, to a process that ensures that we're looking at all of these questions collectively through a process, starting with the overall objective for the department, quality of life, safety, mobility, to looking at the risks that are associated with ensuring that those objectives are met, to establishing strategies for how we're going to manage those, using our performance metrics to determine if we have the right measures, the right targets, and whether or not we're meeting those targets and measures, and determining how we're doing again and bringing this full cycle. It's a method that allows us to look at an overall process that uses risk, performance, and asset management as the three-legged stool to ensuring that we're meeting our strategic objectives, ensures that we're using all of those management practices, not singling out any particular area, ensuring that they work collectively together to meet the overall strategic objectives of the department. We're evolving asset management to risk-based asset management and goal setting then, and within the department, we're looking for case studies of risk-based asset management so that we can continue to improve and bring those examples back, as I think we all are collectively, to understand MAP 21, what it means, and to bring that back home, and looking for what the federal vision will be for that framework for combined risk asset management activities. Thanks for your time. I don't know if we want to take any questions at this point in time.
If anybody has a question, okay, you can save it for. Oh, Mark. No, go ahead, Martin.
Oh, Tim, could you discuss just real briefly when you said 20-year maintenance program? We're struggling a little bit in defining what's true maintenance as far as landscaping and these other things, just to keep it up to the same standard. And where does it break over into preservation that I need to also take maintenance costs and move them into other areas? From your standpoint in Minnesota, what are you looking at on the 20-year maintenance cost, and how are you trying to estimate that?
We're struggling with the same questions, Martin. We're trying to define what maintenance is, what those elements of maintenance are, and then how they relate to the capital investments and those typical elements that sit on the capital side. So I don't have specific answers for you today. We're challenged with dividing up the labor and figuring those things out, and then figuring out how those two will be combined and making overall optimal decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.